Thank you guys for joining me this morning. My name's Nicole Gaines. I am the project co-director and the manager of the NIMAC. And what we are going to be talking about this morning are the procedures for delivering files to the NIMAC. Our special news that we have is that we have streamlined and simplified the FTP batch delivery process, and we wanted to be sure to give folks an opportunity to ask any questions about that. But as a part of the webinar this morning, I'm actually going to go through and talk about kind of the whole gamut in terms of file submission for the NIMAC. So what I'm going to talk about first is just the three different possibilities for options for uploading files or delivering files: manual upload, DVD, and FTP, even though we're going to focus more on the FTP process. So the first way that you can deliver files is that files up to 300 megabytes can actually be manually uploaded to the system. We generally recommend that if your files are over 200 megabytes that you go ahead and deliver by FTP, just because your upload speeds may be kind of slow, but the system can actually handle up to 300 megabytes. So in order to do this, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time walking through this, but the main question that we usually get regarding this question is which feature to use if it's a new file. In other words, the ISBN has not already been uploaded to the system previously. You use the Add New Content link, and I'll show you where that is in a second. And replacement files, if the ISBN is already in the system, you use the Replace Zip File button on the record for that particular file. So when you log into your system, when you log into the NIMAC system using your account, you will see that there's an Add New Content button right under the search box. That's where you go to add a file that's never been uploaded before. Now, if you are replacing a zip file, then you go to the record, and the best way to do that is to just do a quick ISBN search in the search box and click Replace Zip File. And again, if you're not sure, you don't really know, just do the ISBN search. If a record shows up, that's how you know, hey, this is a replacement file. I should not use Add New Inventory. I should use Replace Zip File. So once you actually select that option, whichever one is appropriate, it takes you to a simple dialog. You navigate, and then the system is going to automatically validate and upload the file. If the file fails validation, the system will not accept it, and you'll get an error message regarding what happened. One thing that is kind of handy now is that the system will automatically extract your OPF metadata, and you can view it. If you decide that there's something that you need to change, something was missing, something wasn't quite right, you can make an edit at that point, and that change will be saved not only to the system record, but to the OPF file that's in the NIMAS file and inventory. So this is kind of a nice feature where you can actually edit the metadata all the way up to the point when you're saving it into the system. When you save the file, it automatically goes into uncertified, and this triggers the review process. You don't have to notify the NIMAC. If you would like to send us just a kind of a courtesy email, nimac@aph.org, you're always welcome to do that. We always appreciate that, but it's not required. If you do have any other questions or want to actually view that process kind of walked through, we do have videos on our website at the link that's on this slide. Where you can kind of go through and watch the whole process as it's walked through. As an aside, this PowerPoint and this presentation will be archived on this same page on our website, so that if you are wanting to view it later or just kind of download the PowerPoint for future reference, that will be available to you. So on the other end of the spectrum, for files that are particularly large, if you have a bunch of files or even just one file, if it's over 1 gigabyte per file set, OverDrive does request that those be burned to DVD. We don't often get files that are that large, but occasionally it does come up. If you have any questions about that, I've included the address on here, but again, pretty straightforward. So here's what you've all been actually waiting for, and that's the part of delivering files by FTP. Files that this is generally what folks decide to do in terms of delivering the files. And if they're over 200 to 300 megabyte, if they're over 300, you will need to submit them by FTP. But I also want to point out that there's not a minimum size. So if you've got a bunch of files and they're little readers, or if it just happens to work better for your workflow to deliver by FTP, it's fine to deliver smaller files by FTP. It's just a matter that the upper end in terms of the system supporting a manual upload is going to be about 300. So when you deliver these files by FTP, we always just kind of like to reiterate that, the NIMAC staff, our offices are actually located in Louisville, Kentucky, but our system vendor with whom we work really closely is OverDrive, and they're located in Cleveland. So we work really closely with them. But when you're delivering by FTP, you're actually using those servers in Cleveland. They're not here in Louisville. They're actually in Cleveland. And recently, the FTP process did switch over. Probably everybody on this call has already gotten new FTP credentials, but if you haven't, since the FTP changed to transfer.overdrive.com, you can get those by emailing ftpnimac@privatereserve.com to get credentials for the FTP. When you do request FTP access, you'll always want to reference the NIMAC system login ID for that specific publisher. So basically, if you're needing FTP credentials, you're just going to say, hey, this is my NIMAC login. I need to be able to FTP files in for this publisher's account. So what this means is that if you are a conversion vendor and you work with many different publishers, you're going to have a separate login for each of those publishers. The next thing that I want to go over, and I'm just going to do this really quickly, but I want to just reiterate that we do ask that everybody use the NIMAC validation wizard to validate files before you submit them. The single most common reason for files to be rejected and not be able to be uploaded is that they fail validation. We make the validation wizard free to all publishers and all conversion vendors, and we just do ask that every file be run through that to check to make sure that it passes validation before you attempt to submit it or before you attempt to upload it to the system. We also ask that you check your zip file. This is probably the second most common issue, is that files will be found to be corrupt. The zip file will not open, the files cannot be read, so we ask that you make that check as well. And that's actually really simple, because if you can open your zip file after you've compressed the file set, probably it's not corrupt. The validation wizard, it's a small standalone program. It is only Windows based at this time. One thing that you can do is you can view the results either on your screen, or you can export it as a report if you would like. This is just a screenshot here showing you where the resources tab is in your account. You can always download the validation wizard from that resources page. So you may be wondering, well, what does the validation wizard do? What does the validation wizard not do? Well, basically, validation checks to make sure that the file validates to the NIMAS DTD and that the XML itself is well formed. It also looks to make sure that any image that's referenced in your XML file or your OPF manifest is present in your images folder. So it's a fairly basic, it's an important step for the files, but there are several things that the wizard is not able to do. For one thing, it isn't able to tell whether your metadata are correct or complete. It's not able to evaluate your content or tagging decisions or find missing content, and it's not able to detect extraneous files in the zip archive. So this is all to say that, the validation is the first part in the certification process, but there's also an additional quality control process that I'll talk a little bit more about later. But so the fact that you've passed validation, it means that you're on the right track, but it still could be that there are other issues that are discovered later that are present in the file. So When you go to open up the program on your computer, it's really straightforward. You get a series of dialogues. You just kind of click through. The one thing that I wanted to point out when you're actually in the validation wizard is that there are two options. And the first one, validate OEB package file, this means that you're going to navigate to the OPF file in your unzipped file set. But actually choosing this option validates both the package file and the XML file, so you don't have to run the program twice. If you choose this particular option, it's going to validate your whole file set. It's going to give you a little progress bar, and then it's going to give you the output. And of course, what you're really wanting to see here, 0 errors, 0 warnings for your OPF, 0 errors, 0 warnings for the XML. So once you get this, you're good to go. Again, if you do have errors, you can expand the window to view the report. You can export the report if you want. Some errors will stop the validator, so you always do want to make sure that even if you've corrected that first file that comes up, you want to run your file through the wizard again, make sure there aren't any other issues before you submit the file. And this is just a sample output with showing a couple of errors in the XML. So it's going to give you the detailed information for the error that stopped the validation. Again, this is just a reminder on the corrupt files. After you zip them, click them again. If they open, you're probably good. Now here's the most exciting part here. After you validate your files now, if you're going to be delivering them by FTP, you no longer need to send a delivery notification email. That tracking system is now history, no longer exists. No notification is necessary. You no longer need to supply a batch delivery metadata Excel sheet for new files, ever. That's gone. The Excel sheet will still be available on our website and in the system under resources because it will still be used if you use the Excel to OPF metadata conversion tool, which is an optional tool in the system. So the sheet will still exist, but you do not submit it anymore for any deliveries. You also no longer need to separate files into new files and resubmissions. That's gone. What is new is that each day, now that the tracking, the email tracking to FTP NIMAC is gone, you will receive an automatic daily batch delivery report the day after any submissions have been submitted by you. Okay, FTP deliveries are generally processed overnight, so the morning after that delivery has been processed, you're going to receive this report that details the processing results. If you're a conversion vendor that has delivered files for different publishers on the same day, you're going to receive a separate email report for each publisher. Again, this report takes the place of the delivery tracking system, so please be sure to review every report you receive. This daily report is your official notification from OverDrive when a delivery fails. You will not be notified separately from this report regarding the status of any delivery. So that's just important to know. So what this email is going to look like is you're going to see a chart of each file that was submitted, but at the very top of the report, you're going to see a summary of the upload results. If the report shows no failed uploads, you don't need to take further action. So you don't have to scroll through the whole report if you've delivered 100 files to look for failures. If it doesn't show any failures at the top, then you don't have to worry about it. So this is an example here, and just as a heads up, we're kind of still at the final tweaking stage for what this email is going to look like. So the final version may look just a little bit different, but this is basically what you're going to see. At the top is going to have your batch processing date, and it's going to show your successfully processed files up there, and if there are any failed files, it's going to show them up there as well. So that's what you really want to zero in on. If you see that there are files that have failed upload, what you're going to do is you're going to go look at the results column. You'll find if it says failure on there, then you will go to the details column and see what the issue was. Because as you'll see here, if the processing is successful, the details column is going to be empty. There's no error message. However, Here's kind of an example here where there was a file that failed upload. You see that that failure is, it's going to be the top of your summary there, failed to process. And then under the details column, you can go down and see what has happened. In this particular sample, there was an XML validation failure. And so basically, again, this is your notification. There's a problem here. It failed validation. You need to address this issue and resubmit the file. Okay, so again, if you ever have any questions about the error information, feel free to contact the NIMAC. We're here to help. And I'm sure that, at least for the first few weeks, we'll be trying to provide some additional support. Again, this change will be effective on June 4th. And so after that point, we will have this new process in place, and we will be providing some extra support, at least for the first few weeks. But we just want folks to get used to the idea that the daily report, that is your official notification if a delivery fails. This here is just a chart that I have put together to kind of give you a sense of how to understand what those error messages are. These will not be surprising because they really are pretty much the same format as the validation wizard. So what you're going to see here is basically the same information that you would have seen if you had run the file through the validation wizard and got the output at that point. The only difference being that in the very first example here where it says zip file corrupt, fail to extract data, that's the message that you're going to get if the file was corrupt. The second one, this is a situation where if you include an imprint that is not associated with the publisher, this is not necessarily an error in your file, but it is a situation where if you have a new imprint, then you need to let us know so we can associate that imprint with the publisher. This is basically just to prevent you from uploading a file to the wrong publisher's inventory. Anybody can make a mistake. You could log into, publisher B, but you were actually meaning to upload a file for publisher D. And, so this is kind of a way of saying, hey, we don't recognize that this imprint goes with this publisher. If it's correct, let us know. We can add that imprint and you can resubmit the file and it'll go through. Otherwise, you just need to log into the correct publisher and upload it to a different account. The next one is just some sample validation issues. Again, pretty straightforward. The one thing that I will notice here in the report is that if you have a validation issue, it will show you the name of the file first, then the error. So in this case, for example, we've got a couple of issues with the OPF and then also an issue with the XML. So you can kind of tell where in the file set that problem is. And the very last one, you might be wondering, well, it says success. This is a case where it's just a warning because the DTD that's referenced is outdated. And that actually will not cause your upload to fail, but we do like to let folks know that we prefer you use the most up-to-date DTD in your files. So it's just a warning. You don't have to resubmit the file, but if you could keep it in mind for the future, that would be best. So again, when you upload a corrected file, say you get an error in your daily report, you correct the error, you resubmit the file, you don't have to provide any notification to OverDrive. You just resubmit the file. It's that simple, and then that new delivery is going to show up on the daily report the following day. Now, what I will want to just reiterate here is that, say for example, with that issue with the file that had the imprint, okay, since that imprint was not associated with the account, that upload was not successful. So even though the file is okay, if it turns out, hey, we just need you to add this file, we just need you to add this imprint for this account, the NIMAC staff will do that and then you'll be good to go. But you will still need to deliver that file again so that it can go through that automated processing once that changes in the system. So, and again, if you have any questions about that, just let us know. So the next thing that I want to do is to just talk a little bit, just give you a little bit of brief information about what happens after those files are uploaded the certification process, and to also give some helpful reminders in terms of helping ensure that your files will be uploaded with no problem and that we'll be able to certify them as quickly as possible. In terms of the review and certification process, once files are uploaded to the system, whether that's manually or by FTP or on a DVD, the NIMAC staff review and certify the files. So what we do at that point, again, we already know that your file has passed the validation process. So the second step here is a metadata review and a few just basic XML quality checks. One example with the XML is that we will look for pagination, for example, in your XML file. So once the file has been certified, the publisher super user or primary contact receives an email with the digital certificate number, and that's automatic. You also have the option, if you are a super user, if you want to add additional folks to receive those emails, you can add up to 3 additional email recipients, and just let us know if you're interested in that. We're happy to add those. You can also, if you find later on that you need to go back and refer to those numbers for any reason, those are always in the system. They can be accessed in the full record for individual items in your inventory, or you can just log in. If you log into your inventory, your default is always going to be your full inventory view. And if you click the export button from that screen, you can do a report of all of your inventory. So just let us know if you want any other help in terms of reports or what have you, but you can actually export an inventory report really quickly anytime you like. And those certificate IDs will always be a part of that report. So in terms of the review process and certification, I mentioned that one of the things that we do is to look at the metadata. One of the things that's nice is that we are able to make many OPF and portal metadata corrections without requiring that files be submitted. So generally speaking, if it's a minor metadata issue, somehow the metadata says 2nd edition, but it's actually the 3rd edition, we can fix that for you, and it doesn't cause a glitch in terms of the certification problem. However, there are certain problems that we can't fix for you. One of those, for example, is if there's any issue with the XML, we can't make any changes to your XML file. So if there's anything missing from the XML or incorrect in the XML, we would have to send that back to you. Same thing with PDF. If the PDF that is submitted is incomplete, if that PDF is for the wrong book, those are just things that would have to go back and be fixed for you. So we would send you detailed feedback so that you can correct and resubmit it as soon as possible if it's not something that we can address on our end. So in terms of some common issues, I just want to hit on maybe 3 or 4 issues that come up that cause files to fail the certification process, so that you can kind of keep these in mind. These are just some common things that do come up, but once you kind of consider them in your workflow, they don't need to be obstacles for you. So we just like to take an opportunity to bring these up. The first one is that the PDF in the NIMAS file set, we need to be sure that it's complete. And what we mean by that is that since this is used for file verification purposes, we need for the PDF to include the complete title of the book, whether that's on the title page or it's on the cover. We need it to include the ISBN, whether that's on the copyright page or the back cover of the book, the copyright statement, and the publisher imprint. So again, what we find is that a lot of times, if it's a straightforward textbook, that information is going to be on your title page and your copyright page. That's the simple scenario. But oftentimes what we find, especially with ancillary materials, there may not be a title page. It may only be the cover where all that information is found. Or again, some of this information may only be found, maybe the publisher imprint is only found on the cover. So we just ask that if that key bibliographic information is only on the cover must also be included in the PDF. Now, again, the file is not used in the production of any accessible formats. So the positive side of this is that, we realize that from the book production process, I think that the cover production is often separate from the text production. And this doesn't need to be a huge issue because the PDF does not have to be high quality. So we're not asking for you to provide, the highest quality PDF for your covers. It's only for file verification. So if you need to just scan the cover or whatever, we don't care as long as we can read it. The converse of that is that we do ask that you ensure that the PDF files are not excessively large. Again, providing a production quality PDF, it doesn't add anything to the file set because it's not going to be used when the XML and the images are used to produce an accessible format. It's only for file verification. So if you have any questions about that, let us know. But this is something that comes up a lot. We're verifying the metadata for a file, and we find that, hey, we can't verify the title because it's only on the cover. So we're not able to certify the file until we're actually sure, hey, what is this? What is this book? So this is something that we end up going back to folks with. Another thing that comes up occasionally, and I think that this might actually be an artifact of folks who produce a lot of different digital file formats. I know that in some file formats, metadata is included in the XML file. This is not appropriate for NIMAS. We ask that you do not include metadata in the XML file for the NIMAS file set. The head tag should always be empty, and including this non-NIMAS metadata, it can often cause delays because it's not uncommon for us to find that the metadata are not actually right. They're not consistent with the OPF metadata, and they have to be removed. So we would just ask if it's a part of your process for producing other formats, that's great, but take it out if you're producing NIMAS. It's not needed. The OPF is the place where the metadata reside for NIMAS, and we just don't need it. Take it out. The other part of this is this kind of goes back to that part where if there is essential bibliographic information that only appears on the cover, we also need to ask that this be transcribed in the XML. So again, say that ISBN only appears on the back cover. That's critical information when you're producing an accessible format. So that back cover is going to need to be transcribed in the XML file so that it's there along with that accessible format, whether that's Braille or large print or digital text. That information needs to be present. Same thing with the publisher name. If that publisher name only appears on the cover, transcribe that cover in the XML because that's important to be a part of the accessible format that gets produced. So again, if you have a title page and it's got everything on it that basically is on the cover, you don't have to worry about it. But we do find that a lot of times, especially with those ancillary materials, that key bibliographic information is only on the cover, and we do need that to be present in the XML file. Identifiers, we want to just be sure that you always remember that the identifier for the file set should be the 13-digit ISBN that appears on the print book. We ask that you not use an ISBN that doesn't appear. Sometimes there are ISBNs for identical editions that have the same content. Totally fine to include those in the metadata for searching. We actually prefer that you do that. There's a softcover ISBN, there's a spiral bound ISBN. Include all of those in the metadata for searching, but use the identifier for the file set. That should be the ISBN that actually appears on the print book that was used as the basis of the NIMAS file set. We also ask that you be sure that you use the identifier as the name of the zip file. Another issue that comes up occasionally has to do with folks who use Mac computers. And honestly, I don't really know the technical reason why this happens, but there are occasions when a Mac computer, if it's used to compress the file set, it generates extraneous files in the zip archive. So you just want to make sure that if you're using a Mac, that your compression settings are such that they are not creating any duplicate files or extraneous files in the zip archive. Those additional files can cause the upload process to fail. The other part of that is just that we ask that you not include any other type of extraneous file in the zip either. Again, the validation wizard, it's looking for things that should be there, but it's not quite smart enough to look for things that shouldn't be there. So if you have to provide like a validation screenshot for a particular customer, or if there's some other content that you need to supply to them, please supply that separately. Don't include it in the zip archive. And this again just gets back to the question of new imprints. You may not always know if an imprint is new for the publisher, but if you have a sense that it might be, if it's new to you and you've never seen it before, it may be new to that publisher's account. The other thing that you can actually do if you're not sure is when you log into your account for that publisher in the NIMAC, you can actually do a pick list search using the filters on the inventory to see if it exists. But anyway, the long and short of it is if you do know, just let us know. We can add that imprint before you submit the file, and that will ensure that it will be uploaded smoothly. And that is it. I want to just let people know that OverDrive support is available. If you encounter a technical problem related to a batch delivery, they still can be reached at FTP NIMAC at private reserve. But and with other technical issues, you can contact them at NIMAC support at private reserve. But if you have any questions, again, if you have a question about the daily report, if you have any other question about NIMAC feedback that we've sent, don't hesitate to get in touch. We're here to help. We're at NIMAC at aph.org. And we also have a toll-free number at 877-526-4622. And if there are any questions, we've got plenty of time, but so if anybody has any questions either about the upload process or anything else about the system, please go ahead. I'll open the floor.
Hi, Nicole. This is Shashi.
Hi, Shashi. How are you?
Good, good. How are you?
Good.
I have one question regarding file, NIMAS file certification. Is there any time frame to certify the NIMAC XML file or XML package?
Okay, that's a good question. Shashi is asking about what the timeline is in terms of certification, and really there is a wide variety in terms of whether or not, if there are issues with the files, of course that will take longer if there are corrections that need to be made. But for the most part, the main variable for us is, we've received files now from over 140 publishers, and at any given time, submissions may be light or they may be considerably heavier. So it really just depends. There are times when we may be able to certify files within a couple of days, or maybe even the same day that it's uploaded. Other times it may take considerably longer. What we generally recommend, if you have a specific deadline, is that you submit your files at least 2 weeks before your deadline, and that you let us know. We've got a firm deadline for a publisher on this particular date, and then we can always prioritize if we have received a lot of submissions. But because of that variable, there's not really a hard and fast rule, but we're always happy to prioritize if there is a deadline, and we're able to do that. So thanks for your question.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? Okay, well, again, I just thank everyone for joining us today. And like I say, this webinar will be posted. The PowerPoint will be posted. Our new process will go into effect on June 4th. And if you have any questions, just feel free to get in touch. We're happy to help. Thanks so much and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Nicole.